Hello, everybody. Welcome to What the Frick Live. It's me, Emily, and Will Martinez. How are you doing, Will?
Hey, good evening. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good.
Hey, you know how good I'm doing this week?
How good? How good are you doing?
Is that I already got all of my son's back to school supplies done and delivered to my house. That's how good I'm doing this week.
Look at that. That deserves a congratulations right there. Yes.
He's going to be in 8th grade. And you think that these lists get better over time? Maybe not so much. No.
They get more complicated.
No, they do. Yeah. And more technical stuff or tools and things that they need and all these specific calculators. It goes up, I think, about $50 a year too.
Oh yeah, every year it goes up. My son's going to be a junior next year, so I know exactly what you're talking about. So, yeah.
Well, right I'm very excited. Got all this stuff done and over with. That's and awesome. That was a big accomplishment for me. Every year it is. But Will, Dark Fringe Radio, what's going on over there?
Still, we're just chilling. We are chilling. We're doing the longest sabbatical summer ever. But we're gonna be back next week. I promise. We were supposed to be back this week. Just things not working out. So as far as scheduling is concerned, so we will be back definitely next week on Saturday. Definitely a live show. Not sure exactly what we're going to talk about yet, but it'll be interesting. I promise you. Darkfringeradio.com. Check it out.
Are you all ever going to do the live show too Saturday?
We're going to do a live show. Yeah, that Saturday.
We need a live show. I want to participate and chat.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Everybody go check out darkfringeradio.com. Please go over there. So, okay, let's get into the show tonight. We are streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, and Rumble. Please share this out. Please share this out. If you're watching via Rumble, which I'll pull that up here in a little bit, please give us a thumbs up on there. It's just like YouTube. It helps keep us in the algorithm, keeps us in the search. Same on YouTube. Yes. On Facebook, please give us a heart, a thumbs up, share it out. That's all we ask to do for the show here live. But we appreciate you all tuning in. Ask questions, comments. Also, doing something different for October. I am going to have somebody from Paranormal TV show on, but the other shows, I am looking for people that have had paranormal experiences in the most haunted hotels. We're doing Haunted Hotel Month and Storytelling Month. So I already have a lady that's phenomenal from Nolans. And so she's booked, but I have 2 more spots open for people that just regular viewers that watch the show or anything like that. Please message us here on What the Frick Live. I always book October in end of July, 1st of August, because it gets super busy during that time. People are doing events on Friday nights. So anyway, we appreciate everybody tuning in. Please share the show out. And tonight we have an amazing guest coming on. His name is Jason Hewlett. He is an author of a latest release of Small Town Monsters Publishing, The Legend of Ogopogo, Canada's Loch Ness Monster, which we're going to be talking about Ogopogo. I just keep wanting to say the name. We should have had a drinking game tonight.
How many times do you say Ogopogo?
Ogopogo. It's like Marco Polo. I love it. But Jason is also written other books and has participated in Vancouver Paranormal Society. He's done all kinds of different things. He's worked with Peter Renn in writing a bestseller, I Want to Believe, One Man's Journey into the Paranormal. So let's bring Jason on to the show right now. Hello, Jason. Welcome to What the Frick Live.
Hey, how are you guys doing?
Hey,
good.
Jason.
Thanks so much for having me on. This is exciting.
Yes, very exciting. We are in Canadian. We've had a couple other Canadians on over the years, I think, but not very many. Melissa's Canadian.
Yes, that's true. Yeah,
I know that's for sure. But we appreciate you coming on and all your research you're doing in this Ogopogo drinking game. If you're drinking, drink safe. Don't drink and drive. Have a sip every single time. Do not drink and drive.
Chill and listen to your podcast. Yeah, how about that?
Yeah, don't drive. It's an Ogopogo drinking game because
there we go. Here we go. Cheers, everybody.
End up in water just like Ogopogo.
Thank you, everybody. And we appreciate you. Also, all the information we're going to be talking tonight, especially Jason's website, his book is on Amazon and everything. We'll be talking about that during the show, but all the links are also in the description of the show. So if y'all interested, go over there, click on those links. It'll take you right where you need to be. But Jason, thank you so much. Ogopogo.
Yes.
So this is like the first question I ask everybody that comes on the show, especially if it's a new person who's never been on before. But what made you interested in actually doing research on Ogopogo?
Well, because I'm in British Columbia, Canada, and I live about 2 hours from Kelowna, British Columbia, which is where Lake Okanagan is, and that's where Ogopogo is believed to reside. So being 2 hours away, it was a vacation spot my family would go to quite frequently. Like we'd go there, there's better shopping, better restaurants, we'd go and hang out. And I just grew up listening to stories about Ogopogo. And there's a statue there in the Kelowna Park of Ogopogo. So I'd always make my parents take me to the park and so I'd go hang out at the statue and go down on the dock and kind of look out at the lake and see if I could see this lake monster that's supposed to live there. And it's quite a tourism draw for Kelowna. I mean, they've got images of Ogopogo on like hats, shirts, postcards. They got stuffed animals. So it's not something you can escape. And as I got older, we'd go there as a family, me, my wife, and my son and I. And when my son was young, I took him to the Ogopogo statue that I went and looked at, and he went down on the dock and looked into the water. And it's just something that's a part of our culture here. But it was interesting. So that was why I wanted to research the book. But as I started researching it and then started working on the documentary, Cursed Waters with Eli Watson, I started learning there's a lot more to it than just this tourism draw. And that kind of became the interesting part of the whole process of working on the book and the documentary.
Is that documentary out?
It actually comes out in August. It's called Cursed Waters. But the documentary and the book both debuted at Monster Fest in Canton, Ohio.
Oh,
at
that's
the
close
end
to
of June. Yeah,
okay.
That's where Small Town Monsters is located. So.
Okay, did not know. I did not know about this. So I'm writing it down so I can make sure I watch it because I love a good documentary. That's fantastic.
I helped make it and I'm in it. It is very good. And not just because I'm in it and helped make it. It's just like most Small Town Monsters docs. It's just fantastic.
Yeah.
They do like
I love Small Town Monsters.
Yeah.
Awesome. Jason, let me ask you a question if you don't mind me jumping in, Emily. Okay, so Ogopogo, known as, Canadians, version of the Loch Ness Monster. Is there actual physical resemblances between the two, or is there something distinctly different between the two? Could you elaborate on that at all?
Yeah, absolutely. What's interesting is, so taking it back to Nessie, like a lot of people believe Nessie is like a plesiosaur. And that's because of the surgeon's photo that was taken in like the 1930s, which has been proven to be a hoax. Actually, if you look at documented sightings of the Loch Ness Monster, it and Ogopogo, as do many other lake monsters around the world, are very similar in description. Long serpentine bodies, tail of a whale, and a head of like a horse or a dragon with like these nodules or horns sticking out of it. And that's the same with like Cadborosaurus, which is off the coast of British Columbia. And many in what's this lake monster belt, which Ken Gerhard, renowned cryptozoologist, termed. Ken's awesome.
right? Yeah.
because he believes like a lot of these lakes are basically within almost the same geographical location around the world in terms of latitude and longitude. They're all very similar. Like Lake Okanagan and Loch Ness are both glacial lakes formed during that period. Long, narrow, very deep bodies of water. Lake Okanagan is longer. So there's a lot of similarities, like salmonoid fish that, if this species exists, would feed on within these lakes.
Okay.
So they're actually very much similar. That, you know, a lot of people who are cryptozoologists, and then I became convinced of this, that people are seeing something of the same species, most likely, if it is this flesh and blood creature that people believe it to be.
So Loch Ness and Ogopogo is kind of like the Bigfoot of the lakes.
Basically, and I mean, they're even like just a few degrees off in terms of like latitude. I think Loch Ness is a bit higher, maybe, but that's about it. So yeah, very much the same kind of thing. You know, like there's wild men seen all over the world, right? And they're all very similar in description, much like you say with Bigfoot. So this is also the same, or seeming to be the same with lake monsters as well.
Yeah, because after reading and looking up some of this, I didn't do a huge deep dive because I wanted to learn off you first and then go further with it. But it seems like it's more of a northern hemisphere where these creatures of the lake live, rather than south, like Africa or South America or something like that. So that makes a lot of sense.
Indeed, yeah. I mean, there are some in sort of the southern hemisphere, but it seems definitely a lot more in the north. Right, like I think there's even like Japan has its lake monster, so I think that if you look at it,
it's almost the same.
Yeah, right. So it's interesting that way.
So really quick then. Now we've been doing research with Bigfoot and things here on our show and everything, and you know, the indigenous Indians connection. Is there a connection? Because Ogopogo does sound like an Indian indigenous name. Is there a connection with Ogopogo and indigenous people?
And this is the interesting part. Like, so there is obviously, like as with many indigenous tribes, they do all have their folk stories, etc. And Ogopogo is definitely a part of the West Bank First Nation. That's what they're called today. But Ogopogo is a made-up word that was actually made up for this song called the Funny Foxtrot that was played in the dance halls of the time. And the song is about someone going looking for the creature in the lake. And they just happened, because it rhymed in the song, called it Ogopogo. And people liked that word and started applying it to what people were seeing in Lake Okanagan. But that's not actually what it's referred to as by the indigenous people. The indigenous people call it Nsnaha Itku or Nahakatik to kind of break the word down. And to them, it is not a flesh and blood creature at all. It is literally their water spirit. So it is the lake itself, and it will occasionally show itself in physical form. And if you're lucky, you just happen to see it. And that's sort of where there's these two different stories. So Tourism Kelowna just picked up on the Ogopogo word because it was kind of funny and catchy, and adopted that as what they call the lake monster. But the indigenous people and the people who've lived there for thousands of years don't call it that at all. They call it Nsnaha Itku. And so that's what's kind of fascinating about the story. And I didn't know any of that when I started researching it. So basically, people took the indigenous people's idea and basically made it their own and turned it into this fun, dopey mascot. Which is quite interesting, And I mean, it in the last couple of years, it was copyrighted. Like Ogopogo was a copyrighted name owned by the community of Vernon, which is like 40 minutes east of Kelowna. And they actually just gave the copyright to the West Bank First Nations to have. Wow. And they're like, thanks, but that's not our water spirit at all. It's just this made up thing, which is, I had no idea about that going into researching the book.
So it's more like a Moana kind of thing. Like it's a spirit of the water. It's
really it is literally their water spirit. I mean, and cryptozoologists who come to Kelowna and go to talk to Coralie Miller, who is my contact with West Bank First Nations, and she proved to be a wealth of knowledge. They come up and say, all right, we want to, find Ogopogo and we want to catch it. Like, what do we got to do? And she's like, here, take a cup, go down to the lake, put it in, lift it up. You've got Ogopogo. Just make sure you throw the water back in the lake. Like literally. And that just really eases these people off because they want to find this flesh and blood thing. And like I said, it will show itself to you, much like how Bigfoot, which they refer to in the West Bank First Nations as strunatum, it is their forest spirit. It is a dimension walker. So it phases in and out of our reality, and occasionally it shows itself in a physical form, which is this hairy monster. And and it's sort of something. So like, as you guys hear about paranormal Bigfoot, that's starting to become a thing. Like there's the flesh and blood camp and then the paranormal camp. Well, now with beings like Ogopogo, there's like this paranormal lake monster sort of camp sort of slowly forming, although people are very hesitant to embrace that concept. But I had a hard time believing in like there could be an Ogopogo when I went there. It's a lake. It's a limited body of water. How could a species survive in this place and the body not show up? I mean, it does connect to the Pacific Ocean through the Columbia River, so maybe it makes its way but how come more people don't see it? But when you take in the idea that it could literally be a water spirit, if you're willing to take that jump, it kind of makes its own sort of sense in an own way. Why we haven't seen a body? Because it's a water spirit.
You think because after so many years doing paranormal stuff, I have a true belief that we can speak our own hauntings onto ourselves, or speak our own haunting in a home or location. So many people go and say yes, 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 and people are looking for that. Do you think that with Ogopogo that could be similar, that speaking something into existence and sometimes it manifests?
Well, that's interesting because I interviewed, that's a great question. Because I do the same. I investigate hauntings, right? And there's definitely a case where if you go into an old abandoned rickety building that's supposed to have ghosts, etc., you will probably start to think you've found a ghost, right? Like things will start to happen that fit into that narrative. And you have to be very careful as an investigator, especially if you're applying scientific method, not to get caught up in that. But we interviewed a couple, Eli and I, named Dale and Colleen, and they took a picture that circulated in October of 2022 of what they thought could be the Ogopogo in the water. They were out sailing on this very quiet, sunny, calm day. There was no boats on the water. Their boat was a sailboat, so it's not making any noise, and they saw something in the water, and they took this picture that resembles the description of like the head, like a horse or a dragon with the nodules sticking out of the water, and you can see what looks like a neck going down into the water from there. That's the picture there, exactly.
Yeah, I have the video of them too. I was going to play. Go ahead.
And what was interesting is before that, like Colleen had sort of suffered sort of a family tragedy, and she was very, she was like obviously very upset and everything. And she sort of said before going out, like she just sort of said, like, please God, can you just give me something to take my mind off my grief at this time? And then lo and behold, within that trip, they saw that in the lake. So was that sort of, the universe or whatever you want to refer to sort of providing that? Did she manifest that herself? I don't know, but it was an interesting coincidence that you don't really make that connection to like that kind of question you asked there, Emily. Could you will something like that into existence, especially if it is a water spirit?
I mean, this is interesting. Do you all classify this as a true image of possible Ogopogo, or to me, it looks like reef in a sandcastle. I hate to say that, just the horns. But it also looks like a head of a dragon.
It does. It does look like the head of a dragon. That was taken like in the middle of the lake in more than 250 feet of water.
Holy jeez.
Yeah, that wouldn't be like that out there in the middle of nowhere for like no reason.
There wouldn't be. There wouldn't be like.
I'm a fisherman.
Well, I'm sorry. I'm just throwing this out there. I don't know. I'm not an expert, but when I first look at it, I think of old rock with stuff on it, or some kind of reef, or and then the horns of it.
Boat, like Dale and Colleen, and they had a friend with them named Myrna, and this thing was, they say if it was the head, it was 3 feet wide.
Wow.
Right? So it wasn't small, it was huge.
Here,
it wasn't bobbing up and down. It was sitting very just calmly in the water, like something just below the surface looking up at them.
I have a video of these two. Let's play this. This is off TikTok.
Tale of the season, Dale Hanchar, his wife Colleen, and their neighbor Myrna Germaine Brown saw something shocking beneath Okanagan Lake's surface.
Nice easy breeze, cruising out across the lake, and we saw something in the water. And as a boater, I was just looking, is this something dangerous that needs to be marked so somebody doesn't run into it? We went by it. It looked like a log down into the water, but didn't look quite right.
That's when they snapped a photo.
It wasn't until we got home, we got looking at it and zoomed in on it that we were like...
puzzled.
The horns are if we can call them that,
so
the nodules.
Yeah.
Oh, at least 3 feet.
And then it goes out from there.
Wow.
And, it would have been that big. And that's why I thought if it was Ogopogo sleeping, I don't want to be here.
Ogopogo. The stuff in the water. Man, Leviathan. We got Leviathan going on out there too.
Listen, I don't mess with the water.
I do not. Like, that would terrify me. Is that the correct description? I know we talked about Ogopogo there looking like Nessie, but those images there towards the end of that video, is that how you envision Ogopogo?
No, that's not accurate. That was people having a bit of fun with some pictures for sure.
It looks like Leviathan, or it looks like Godzilla is what it looks like.
Yeah, that looked a lot more like Godzilla. And as a lifelong Godzilla fan, I know what Godzilla looks like. So
Yeah.
But when you hear their story, like Dale and Colleen's story, and you're out on that boat with them in the lake, and you see that, like, it becomes a lot more plausible that they took a picture that could have very well have been Ogopogo.
It definitely looks like the head of a dragon or something too when you sit and look at it. Even it looks like you have the eye of it or anything, and just sitting there, didn't move or anything. So that's kind of eerie too in itself, and how large it was. It seems like if something was that large, it would be heavy enough to sink to the bottom and not float to the top.
And if
why would something like that be out
bob
there?
up and down, right? Like if it was a log or a stump, it constantly would bob up and down. So it's interesting. And I mean, if you find a picture of the statue, that looks very similar to the statue that's in Kelowna Park. Like looks, it's convincing.
Kelowna Park is that what you said?
Ogopogo statue, Kelowna Park. We'd probably bring it up. I might even have it in the book here, but I don't know if it'd show up well enough for people.
Okay, let me see here. Is it underwater?
No, there's one that's underwater as well, which would scare the crap out of me.
Yeah.
That one there, just sort of the second one in on the top row. That one is the statue.
That one? Okay.
Of course,
let's see if this will open up bigger. Maybe. I can zoom in. Hold on. Let me just zoom in on it. There we go. That's a little bit bigger there.
Kind of see like the nodules pointing
horns.
up.
Yeah. Look at that. Like a giraffe.
It does look like, giraffe.
Right? A giraffe looks like that.
With scales.
Yeah, the giraffe looks like that.
That looks like it. It looks like it. Holy smokes, these people probably got it.
And Eli and I had a copy of their picture, and we went back to the statue, and you just put them up side by each, and it looks very convincing, right? It looks very convincing.
It is very convincing.
They had no reason to fake anything. They don't know Photoshop. They don't,
So what's this statue of Ogopogo in the water?
Someone just sunk that, like the Tourism Kelowna sunk that into the water so people could scuba dive down and take a look at it, basically, which is pretty neat.
That would terrify me.
If it was there, I'd crap my pants.
I mean, if you go diving at night, and go see that, right? Yeah. Tell me, please.
You don't even dive during the day in Ohio River over here in Appalachia. They said there's fish down at the bottom of the river that's the size of vehicles, like vans. Like that's how big they are down there at the bottom of Ohio River. But that would scare me to death if I saw that. Yeah, even if I expected it to be there, I think if it just came up on me while I was scuba, no, I'd be out. Peace out. See you later.
Jason, how long have they been seeing this thing in this area for? Like, how long have they been seeing this thing?
If you can count the indigenous people's sightings, it's been like thousands of years.
Oh, really?
Susan Allison was the first sort of European settler, and that would have been in the 1800s, I believe. So a couple hundred years for sure. And she reported in her journal seeing what she thought was a dinosaur in the lake. John McDougall, who was a Métis settler, was taking his horses across. This was, I think, a few years before Susan Allison's sighting. He had 3 horses he was taking across the lake in a canoe. And suddenly the horses started getting pulled under one by one, and he had to cut the rope to one of the last horse to avoid his boat from getting pulled under. And this is the only, if it was Itnaha-Itku or Ogopogo doing this, it's the only aggressive story associated with Ogopogo. For the most part, it's believed to be a very friendly, docile creature. If it is a creature, if it's the water spirit, it's not an aggressive spirit at all. So we're talking like, hundreds of sightings over thousands of years. So long history.
I want also to with the evidence here, we just saw this picture, we pulled up this couple's story, but one of my questions I have here is, what kind of evidence do you consider most compelling in support of Ogopogo? I mean, there's some other videos. I have another video that we'll probably play here in a little bit, but when somebody comes to you and shows you things, what makes you decide that this is true evidence of a possible sighting or interaction with Ogopogo?
The Folden film, which Art Folden took in the 1960s, I believe. It was like the first real video footage of Ogopogo, and it's believed to be very compelling. And a number of video experts have looked at it, and it's been well studied over the years. They deemed that they did get a video of some long creature, potentially up to 60 feet in length, moving across the lake in the water. That something that was believed to be organic and not like a boat or something like that. That's a very convincing bit of footage. There was another video taken. I can't remember when exactly it was. We have it in the documentary, which was quite good. It was these three objects in the water. Like there's a person water skiing. There's people on shore taking a video of this person water skiing. There's these three objects in the water, and the water skier kind of almost like sees them and then falls into the lake around where these three objects are moving about that they can't discern, that they believe could have been three Ogopogo at once. That's a pretty compelling bit of video footage. And then there's an anecdotal story of a gentleman who was like swimming for charity, like in the water. And he claimed he actually had to come out of the water a couple times because he saw something serpentine in the water swimming alongside him, basically, which is quite interesting as well. So there's, like I said, and there's been sightings with 12 people seeing this at once. At one time. So that if you get one person, it's one thing, but if you have 12 people at the same time saying they saw something in the water, that lends it a lot more credibility. And Ogopogo is one of the few lake monsters where there has been multiple people seeing it at the same time, which is why it's so well documented and considered like even more so than Loch Ness, the most documented lake monster.
Jason, are there any military
good question.
like stationaries around that area, maybe that let's just say hypothetically, let me just go.
We have Canadian forces
going with this, right?
everywhere. Like I can't.
That's why I said, good question, because I have that on my my list.
I don't have to go on a fishing.
I'm marking it off right now.
Yeah.
Most cities have their own sort of CFB, Canadian Forces base.
Right.
But I'd like to point out these sightings go back a lot further than any time the Canadian military has been around.
You're right.
So, but I know that's one thing people always like to come up with, right? Well, is there a military base around that?
You got to check all the boxes, my friend.
Right? I know, especially with Bigfoot and UFOs, etc. I don't know what we don't have the funding in our military to put any kind of project like that together.
Yeah.
For one, I don't know what people would do with something, especially when it's not an aggressive being
military.
Well, I just worry. What I worry about this with this question is that it has been well documented for many centuries, whatever, of these beasts and things. And is the military using some kind of mind control, laser technology, voice of God type stuff to see if that equipment's working? And it would be easy to pick a pool, no pun intended, of individuals that's looking for something and say, hey, we're going to throw these waves over that area or EMF over in that area and just see what happens. And I do believe a lot of that happens with Bigfoot and aliens. I don't know about the water. I don't know about Ogopogo, but that's what I think of when I think of military in their research. They're using these devices as war weapons that we're not used to,
like infrasound and things like that. The fear frequency, etc. I mean, I don't know. We're up in Canada. We tend not to do these weird things. At least we don't find out about it publicly. I'm sure they're playing around with their own pools and stuff. I mean, I've had what I think was an infrasound experience like twice in the same place, but it was in the woods. You know what I mean? Like it was sort of, we live in I live in Sasquatch territory. Maybe it was a Bigfoot. Maybe it was someone else playing around with this technology. I don't know, but I know it was absolutely a terrifying experience. There's not a lot associated in terms of fear. Like a lot of the people who see Ogopogo are like Dale and Colleen. They're more just like kind of mystified by it. There hasn't been people that have been terrified by it. I mean, if you're swimming and you see something next to you, you're probably going to get out of the water and into a boat. Just take you by surprise. But he got back in the water and continued to swim. So it wasn't something where he was so scared he was scared literally out of the water. It's more of an experience that kind of, I think, mystifies and makes people even more curious about what this could be, right? Like there's no like odd disappearances on the lake. There's no unexplained events like that. Boats being capsized. It's so typically Canadianly calm. Like almost, for lack of a better word to say it, right?
Yeah, nothing's going on there.
Yeah, the McDougal story even could account for the horses could have been pulled under by currents in the water.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Exhaustion, currents in the water. Time of day, water's cold, they tire and they go under. And he could have been exaggerating it, and of course he lost his horses, so he's blaming the lake monster everybody's seeing. So that could have been the case as well, right?
Shift blame.
Yeah,
shift blame it on that.
Yeah, I lost my horses. Well, it was the lake monster's fault.
Yeah,
it's crazy. It's crazy.
I'm going to try to pull a picture of this lake up. Go ahead, Will. I wanted people to see how long this is. It looks like a narrow lake, but very long.
Very long, narrow lake. Yeah.
Do you think there's portals underwater where these creatures go back and forth through, and maybe go from place to place?
There have been, especially the indigenous people believe that all the lakes kind of in the area are connected with underwater tunnels. And research has been done, like Bill Stesiak went on. He's like sort of one of the leading Ogopogo researchers in the region. He has a website, ogopogoquest.com. He's been a part of 2 expeditions, one around a place called Rattlesnake Island, which is traditionally where the indigenous people believe Ogopogo lives. And they did find actual caves underneath the island, which they don't know where they went or how far they were, but they do. Water was being pushed back out. So that is another potential theory that these creatures are using these underwater tunnels to travel to different lakes, because almost every lake in the interior has a sighting or two at any one given time. Shuswap Lake, which is about 90 minutes to the northeast, has what they call Shuswagi, which is not as well documented as Ogopogo or several other lake monsters, but it's a very similar description again. So that is a really good theory, right? And then the indigenous people believe that these things dimension walk anyway, so they could probably just go wherever they
want to anyway. Right. Yeah.
Can't zoom in. I can't zoom in on this for some reason, but that's like the blue body of water here.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Very long.
Yeah.
Very narrow.
It almost looks like Ogopogo with a mouth open up there at the top.
It kind of does actually.
Down to the bottom. It won't let me zoom in. I don't know why. But here it says Ogopogo has lived in the lake since 1800s.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd say it goes back even further than that. Those are just kind of when the first real documented sightings would have taken place.
Ogopogo. We should have done a drinking game tonight for sure. Sorry, everybody. So I know this might be a little bit off topic, because you said you had an experience in the woods that was frightening. With sonar. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. There's sort of an hour east of us, there's the Shuswap Lake region, which I mentioned, where people have seen Shuswagi. And my family had a cabin out there long since before I was born. And in 1996, and I'd had weird experiences out there before, none that were frightening, but just unexplainable sort of things that kind of get a bit out there. But I remember in 1996, I'd been rebuilding the deck of the cabin, and I finished the deck, and I'm like, I don't want to go home. I'm tired. I want to spend the night. So when I was hanging out, and I was just, I was having a beer, and I was listening to music, and I was relaxed. Everything was fine. I'd spend a great deal of time out there by myself, like weeks, just on my own. I'm not nervous in the woods at all. And suddenly, all I could say is I went from completely calm and serene to like terrified.
Oh, that's not a good feeling.
Like that. And it's like, I have to leave. Like, I have to leave right now. I cannot be here any longer. I have to go. Something bad is going to happen. And I'm usually quite rational, but I listened to that thing, and I just packed up all the stuff. I loaded it all into the car, and the sun was setting, so it was getting increasingly dark. And before I left, I had to go shut off the pump, so that you can't leave the pump running. And it took 5 minutes to run around to the back of the cabin and go underneath it and turn off the pump and get back to the car. And I'd have to say that was among the most terrifying 5 minutes of my life. I got in the car and I drove, and it took almost the whole drive back to town for that feeling to leave me.
Holy crap.
So that was 1996. And then in 2017, same location, we'd since rebuilt the cabin up to make it more like a lakeside home. Same thing. I was out there for my annual trip. I kind of like to go out there by myself every year for a few days, just kind of decompress and relax. Everything's perfectly fine. I'm going to stay one whole extra night. And then that same sensation, like exactly the same sensation, kicked in again. And I just literally same thing. I packed everything up. I put it all into the truck, and I just fortunately didn't have to go deal with the pump because it was all inside and protected. So I just went in, locked the door, got in the vehicle, drove back. And again, it took almost the whole drive back to town for that sensation to go. So 21 years apart, same feeling. Never happened any before or since then, just those 2 times. And what was it? I have no idea. But I know it's Sasquatch country. That's the only thing I can say. And then I've had other interesting paranormal events happen there. And again, it was on a lake, so it's on a body of water too, right? I can't discount that either. So yeah, interesting stuff.
Anybody else in your family or anything have that experience too, or?
No, I don't ever remember my folks. They're both since passed away, but ever talking about that kind of sensation. I've been out there with, like, my wife's never had an experience. My son, when he was young, he'd get kind of creeped out, but it's the woods, it's quiet, it's not his usual bedroom, right? Like, and he's since, grown that. We've since sold the place, and I never heard anything from any other people that live around there. But again, do you go and say to your neighbor at the lake, hey, did you get really freaked out last night? Because I just had to leave. It's just something you get hesitant to bring up, right? So maybe other people are having things, but just don't.
Plus, it's the kind of property that most people are not going to be in there 24/7 too,
No, it's not. It's more seasonal properties, right?
Right,
Exactly.
exactly.
Like that. So, but this was both. The first experience was sort of in about May, and then the most recent one back in 2017 would have been September. So.
Wow. Go ahead, Will, if you have a follow-up question.
Yeah. So we talk about Ogopogo. We talk about the Loch Ness Monster. There's just a lot of similarities. So does this all derive from more of the Native American culture, more so than anything else? I would say it sounds like it does.
It does. It's strictly based on that, and then was adopted by the European settlers when they moved in, right? Because they started hearing the stories. They'd see the indigenous people making offerings to the lake for safe passage, and then blew it up into making sacrifices, which it wasn't. It was like tobacco. Little bits of beef, but they just took this story and ran with
beef. It sounds like a good time.
Yeah. That's a sacrifice, Emily. That's a sacrifice.
Kentucky over here. We got some.
They make it. The stories would circulate that they're like sacrificing whole cows, right? Like they're just killing cows and throwing them into the lake to appease this demonic monster, which was never the case. It was like little bits of tobacco and meat and that kind of thing, right? Like. It's funny how people just view things and blow it out of proportion.
Blow it up.
Yeah.
That's great.
Speaking of blowing up, and we've talked a little bit of like military and stuff. So with your research with Ogopogo and things, what like technology do you all use to try to discover if Ogopogo truly exists?
Well, that's the funny thing. It's one thing to, kind of go ghost hunting or even Bigfoot hunting in the woods. You can use your FLIR cameras and, digital recorders. And if you want to use spirit box or whatever, you can do that. Looking for a lake monster takes a lot more effort because it's on the water. When we went out there making cursed waters, we went with very little. We just kind of with our camera equipment and connected with people who had sightings. And, did expeditions out to Rattlesnake Island in a boat and just kind of kept a watchful eye. I know other people have gone on with full-on submersible submarines, side scans, sonar, underwater cameras. Like you can go, depending on how much money you have to play with, you can go all out. We kept it very simple, which I sometimes think is quite often the best way, because when a lot of this stuff happens, it happens when you least expect it.
That's exactly right.
You've turned everything off, right? This isn't
like anything else.
Yeah, it's a very intelligent. I think the paranormal in general has its own form of intelligence to it, and it's aware of what we're doing, and it likes to kind of play with us from time to time. So,
well, I know the best Class A EVPs that I've ever gotten, and believe me, I'm an EVP queen. That's what I love EVP. I grew up in a musically talented family. I've always had headphones on my ears. And stuff is the times that we're not paying attention and we're just having normal discussion, right? Yep. And then what was that? Like comes through, like, and I go back and I'm like, then there was a class EVP, and a lot of times it's answering what we're talking. Like it's like they want to be included in our discussion as well. So
absolutely, I've had the same, right? I've done the same. Our team has done the same. My colleague Pete Renn, same thing. He's been doing it for 30 years. Like it's just, it's always when you least expect it, or you're not planning to get anything. So when we investigate, which is a bit off topic, we like to leave the audio and video running all the time.
Yeah, I do that. I have audio recorders in every room when I investigate. and have it running all the time. But I'll always try to make sure people mark, like if their stomach's growling or something. That's my
We do
stomach.
the same thing. You know.
It sounds like a demon.
Before an investigation.
That's happened to the best of us. Yeah.
Well, paranormal and food go hand in hand. Like I'll never forget this one time I rolled up on an investigation, and they were bringing out a oven. They were bringing out a microwave and everything that pop up in this place. Like, man, these people are really in deep with this. They got food for days on that investigation. I was like, just make sure if your stomach's growling or anything, you just mark it when you're in there. That's my stomach.
Yep.
That's right.
Yep. Jay's stomach, Emily's stomach.
No, that's great. I love it. Well, Jason, I mean, so Ogopogo, what's next? I mean, I'm sure there's other cryptids in Canada that are around, and I've heard of some in that area. So are you guys expanding outside the world of Ogopogo, or you guys, what's next for you, Jason?
Actually, yeah, like I've begun doing research on a book about the Wendigo.
Oh, Wendigo.
Earlier, Will, and it's sort of, I've gone up to Edmonton, Alberta, and into northern Alberta, where the story sort of began with Swift Runner, and I've interviewed people up there who've had a sighting. And actually, even tonight, my colleague Pete and I, there's been a sighting near where I live, so we're going to go up to that area and investigate it and bring some equipment up to see if we can corroborate what these people believe they saw. Which the Wendigo is interesting. It's very fascinating because people don't like talking about it, because it's amazing how many people believe in the Wendigo, like still believe in the Wendigo, and that even talking about it is just bad, like, bad Scoobies all around that you can bring it in. And I've already said it 3 or 4 times.
Excuse me, I'm sorry for interrupting. Isn't it the Crow that are the ones that really the ones that believe in the Wendigo, are the ones that are
the Cree and the Algonquin, I believe, are the two main tribes that believe in it, at least up here in Canada.
Okay, gotcha.
So, but I mean, I've been talking to people, and there's been sightings, like I say, near where I live, which is in Kamloops, British Columbia, in the interior of BC. People have seen it down in Vancouver. Like, it's something that's still being quite well documented to this day, and even sightings up in around south of Edmonton at Mameo Beach, last summer. So it's been kind of interesting to kind of dive into this story and start doing the research on it. So I'm hoping soon I'll be able to start the research. Hopefully tonight and next weekend will be kind of my last bit of pre-research and interviews, and then I can be able to start putting it in together, this book, into some kind of form, and see where it goes. When I went into writing Legend of Ogopogo, I thought it was going to be a collection of Ogopogo sightings. I had no idea the story would veer off in the direction that it went. So with the Wendigo book, I'm not even planning something. I'm just going to see where it takes me once I start writing it.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll find yourself in a lot of different directions, especially up there. I mean, there's so many different legends of Canada. I mean, people, like you said, and is it just because it's Canada? You think that's what it is, Jason? I mean,
I think so. And it's like, we're a huge, like, landmass, maybe even bigger than the States all told, but our population is like, you could put all of us in the state of New York, right? So you've got these little areas, like these urban centers, and a lot of people living in the rural communities and in the woods, and they see things. Like, if you spend any time in the woods, like, it doesn't take much for your mind to start going. And if you know that there's supposed to be these stories, like, Wendigos and tricksters and Sasquatch and the little people, lake monsters, and if you're out east, there's, like, where kind of the country really began, there's like boatloads of places that are supposed to be haunted and have been reported haunted for like hundreds of years. So I think, like I mentioned earlier, we don't seem to embrace these stories so much, but I think it's important that we start really paying attention to them, because it's a big part of our culture. And it's one thing I admire about you guys down in the States, is that you have sort of started embracing your history and these legends, and and paying attention to them. And that's kind of why I like writing these books, is just trying to get the word out there. And I thought it was great that Small Town Monsters was interested in a Canadian story and gave it the attention I think it deserves. So a lot of people like yourselves have been reaching out wanting to talk about it. And that's kind of my hope with these other stories. If I can tap in and start writing about them, start sharing these stories with people, and maybe people start paying more attention.
I'm hoping there's an uptick in all this, because I strictly stayed with paranormal for many, many years, but my mind is now going over to these cryptids or indigenous people as well, and research on these things, because I think they all kind of relate together in many ways, and then other ways they don't relate. But what's very interesting with Ogopogo, I think, is the water, Loch Ness. And then everybody's like, you know, we have Godzilla movies, everything out in the water. You don't know what's coming out of the ocean. Like, what was it? Like, how much do we know knowledge of the ocean? Was it 25% or something?
If that, I think.
Less than that.
Yeah. So with my deep dives, no pun intended, but I am like really looking into this and researching this myself just for fun. I'm a geek. I like this, and I'm glad you wrote this book. I'm going to be buying the book, and I can't wait for the documentary too. That'll be out in August. Cursed Waters, which is a perfect title for that. Is it cursed? Are they cursed? I mean,
it's sort of. I think because it's also like, and it comes up in the book and definitely came up in the documentary. There's an environmental component to this. Like we as people tend to like kind of just treat nature and the environment as our little stomping grounds. We can do whatever we want with it. But if there's a Sasquatch in the woods, it relies on the environment. If you know, Ogopogo is, if it's a flesh and blood creature living in the water, or if it is the water itself, the water needs to be preserved and protected. You know, but people are dumping their garbage in it. There's all the fuel from the boats. So cursing the water, it's more about like, if you're cursing the water with our pollution, you're then harming the species this water spirit that's been around a lot longer than we have as an integral part of our environment. So it's sort of pay attention to that. Like here in BC, Greenpeace actually got the BC provincial government to designate Ogopogo an endangered species. And you're not supposed to hunt it in any way, shape, or form.
Good.
So you know, people they took it seriously enough, which is great. But it's don't curse the water. Like treat the water with respect and you know, preserve it. We as people rely on the water, so we should need to pay more attention to that in the environment. That's kind of why the documentary has that title, "Cursed Waters." It's sort of about, you know, protecting the water, the environment, and the species that lives within the lake.
I have another video here of possible Ogopogo, and I'm sure you've seen it, but I want to play it and I want to get your intake on it. Here we go.
What is it?
Jim LaRock says he couldn't believe his eyes.
Can't be a wave.
Mysterious ripples breaking through Skaha Lake's glassy surface near Hewlett on June 1st.
And all I heard was like a swooshing sound, like swoosh, swoosh.
He scrambled to pull out his cell phone and hit record as his son waited on a paddleboard nearby.
He turns and sees a flipper come up out of the water and hit the water.
Take another look. LaRock believes this mysterious wake is actually 7 fins paddling in sync.
So if you flip the dragon boat upside down, you would see all those oars kind of coming out of the water.
More than 120 feet long, he's convinced it's the most conclusive evidence yet of the legendary lake serpent.
And this is, in my opinion, a definitive Ogopogo sighting.
So have you seen that footage before?
I have, and it's good. It is good. I mean, I don't know if I see flippers, but it definitely has that undulating motion of something moving through the water, which is how you know, Ogopogo and other lake monsters have been described as moving. And it's neat that he was able to. What I like about it is he's got like his son on the paddleboard, which helps give it to scale, right? Like there's that one shot where you can see that. I like it when
you can actually see how big it is. Right.
Yeah, you see just how big it is and how it's moving. So I think that was 2019, and that was a great bit of video evidence, recent video evidence of it. It even predates Dale and Colleen's picture by a few years. There's one, I remember footage back in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s that was picked up by Unsolved Mysteries.
I might be able to find it. I love Unsolved Mysteries. Let me see if I can find it. I might be able to find it. Go ahead, keep talking.
How scared I was.
In the slide, it was very disappointing because that was at a time there's no internet, right? So you hear that these guys shot this video of what they believe is Ogopogo, and Unsolved Mysteries bought the rights to it, and the Inquirer got the photographs, and it was all released at the same time. And it's clearly, my dad and I actually sat down to watch the episode together because it's like, cool, let's see what this guy got. It's Ogopogo. It's in the neck of the woods. It's clearly a beaver slapping its tail onto the water.
Oh, never mind. I'm not going to find it then. I'm not going to.
Irrefutable proof in the existence of Lake Okanagan's lake monster. And my dad and I just went like, that's a beaver, man. Like, that was a police that took that video.
That's hilarious. I love it.
Unsolved Mysteries, I swear to you, there's something attached to that show, because every single time I'd watch that when I was growing up, I always saw a shadow figure in my room or in the hallway or something. I would turn it off.
That show gave me the creeps. Yeah.
It
Yeah,
did.
gave me
It's
the
something
creeps.
about the music and Robert Stack's presence
Yes.
and his voice,
Yeah.
right? Like it
Voice.
just
His cadence was just like,
cadence, the way
yeah.
he talked. It was just creepy. Great show. And I even like the new one on Netflix. They kind of
Yeah,
revitalized
it's
I
good,
saw it.
right?
Mhm.
New
Yeah.
season's coming out soon. They did it, and they wisely didn't try to replace him with the like bring in a new host,
Right.
because you just can't do it.
Right. You just can't. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which was
No,
smart.
you can't. You can't. You may be able to get an AI host nowadays. That sounds
That's
just
not
like
the
him.
same.
Yeah,
I
Robert
know it's
Stack,
not the
no.
same, but
No,
you
thank
know,
you.
we're seeing a lot of that though coming about. AI voices, even in business companies and stuff, using AI voice
Video
for
game industry
training and all
just
that
went
kind of
on
stuff.
strike.
What?
The video game industry just went on strike. All the video game
Did it?
industry, yeah, all the actors and all the voiceover actors and everything, they all just went on strike.
Same with the
Wow.
last
AI.
summer with the Hollywood strikes, right? The writers and the
Yeah.
actors, they have clauses in their contract that you can't use
Mhm.
AI, because of course they'd use it. The producers and stuff would love to use that. They don't have to pay people then,
Of course, yeah.
right?
So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense there with money wise, but I think Hollywood's fallen. It has fallen, and I don't think it's ever going to bounce back. But I do want to ask a question too with Ogopogo too, and this is probably my last question for you on the subject until I read your book. And we'd love to have you come back on, Jason, especially
That'd
after
be
your
fantastic.
Cursed Waters comes out. I'm absolutely going to be watching that and everything. But so. You know, Will mentioned Loch Ness Monster in the beginning. Have you correlated? Have you spoke to other people that's investigated Loch Ness Monster and compared it to Ogopogo? Do you all like team up?
So yes, no. I know I've spoken with Ken Gerhard quite a few times. He's even interviewed in the book, and we've compared notes. And Steve Culls, who's a researcher out of New York, he's mostly does Bigfoot, but he was part of a Loch Ness expedition a few years ago, and I interviewed him and just picked his brain for ideas on what we could do when we were out at Loch Ness. Not Loch Ness, when we were out at Ogopogo, because he'd done the Loch Ness expedition. But I mean, Ken's the one that pointed out to me, and then I did my own research after, how these things all look the same. Traditionally, they look the same. And so they'd be part of, in his mind, the same species. So I just think, and I've been to Loch Ness myself. Like I've been to Loch Ness. I've been on the shores of it. I spent time watching, just, I've been out there twice in my life, and we're fortunate to look. And like I say, the similarities are just striking in terms of just the environment, natural environment itself. Loch
I'm just
Ness
wondering. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jason.
Loch Ness is a lot murkier than Lake Okanagan, though. Like it's very peaty, and the visibility is very poor, which I mean lends itself to something be able to live down there and not be seen so easily if you're going down with submersibles or diving yourself. Like it can be, your visibility can sometimes only be feet in front of you, whereas Lake Okanagan is very much more of a clean lake with really good visibility.
I was just wondering if sightings from Loch Ness and sightings from the lake there with Ogopogo, if they correlate with each other, if there's like we talked about, an uptick in sightings with Bigfoot and stuff, it all happens like around the same time. I'm wondering if they're seeing Loch Ness at the same time as people are seeing Ogopogo.
That I couldn't answer that definitively. It seems like the sightings, at least that are coming up that I become aware of, there's no real logic to them, and I know they don't seem to coincide with like the sightings of Ogopogo that have happened recently in the last few years. One thing with these, they definitely just seem to be, the only word I can think of is scattershot. Like there's no real logical reason, like when or where or how or day or night or times of day. I know around Rattlesnake Island and Squally Point, where Ogopogo is supposed to live, there's a larger number of sightings in other parts of the lake, which is probably supports the indigenous theory that that's where it lives. But other than that, there's not really any sort of rhyme or reason to when people see it.
Like could they be possibly like night creatures more?
That's a very good theory, I think. Yeah. And that's why you don't see it as much. It comes to surface. And it did make sense. If you are like a living, breathing thing, and there's boats, there's motors that are loud all the time going on during the day, you're going to come up and feed and look around when there's no one really around. Which Dale and Colleen wrote, like I said, it's October, it was fall, there was no boats, they're in a sailboat, it's quiet, that's when our salmon run's taking place. It makes more sense that this would be closer to the surface at a time when it deemed it safer for itself.
Okay. Go ahead, Will. I'm sorry. I asked a few questions back to back there because I was just really interested. That was my last question I have on my list here, so I'm checking it off.
One thing I wanted to know, Jason, is I know when you like initially look at it as a subject and like you started initially like investigating like Ogopogo, for instance, you know, you find things out, but then when you really start looking at it and you put a documentary together, I'm sure there's extra things that you find out about, you know, the actual subject matter, you know, you're investigating. Is there something that, you know, you looked into after the fact? You're like, wow, I found that out after the fact and thought that was like, oh, that's something very interesting that I wish I knew earlier.
Definitely, like the whole fact that Ogopogo was a made up word. Like going into that story, I had no idea. I knew that there was the song, but I didn't realize how like it had nothing to do with the actual folk story about it and the indigenous. I had no clue, and nor like I knew it was a tourist draw, but I didn't know to the extent that how far it was and how it was unrelated to the West Bank First Nations and how they don't really want anything to do with that. Like it's just it's basically this story. There's two different things.
Right.
It's almost like there's the Western side and the indigenous side, and how the indigenous people are like okay with it, but they don't want that muddied with their story. And they even have people in their own communities who are believing the Ogopogo story more so than their story that has been with them for thousands of years. So that was really a surprise to me. And that's why the nature of the book changed so much as I was writing it. And that's kind of what I've now, it opened my mind to things that when I kind of go into these stories or even to, you know, investigate hauntings, is to kind of have that more open mind and try to look at the fuller picture of things and not just focus in on one particular angle or story related to a place. I mean, when we investigate, even just because a place is supposed to be haunted doesn't mean that it is. And just because you have one unexplainable thing happen doesn't mean that everything that happens after is going to be paranormal. Like you have to look at each encounter, each experience as its own separate story and analyze it on its own terms and not just say, oh, well, I saw something down the hall, and so everything that happens in this house is now haunted. That's not the case. You got to look at every little bit individually and almost have to debunk each thing, have a very skeptical approach to all of it, I think.
I think it's a very healthy approach.
I always go into each area of investigation that it's not haunted at all.
And that's a good way to approach it too.
You know, and yeah, it looks spooky, but that's the battlefield of the mind. You know, it could look spooky. I do my very best. Now, these large locations, as are on TV, it's a totally different story. But like residentials and all that kind of stuff, I do my very best to limit myself to any kind of stories that they may have. I may listen to one incident or two incidents that they have, especially if it's children. I'll do two, but I don't want to know anything else really about it. And then I'll go in because I do believe a lot of it is mind trickery. And once you start thinking something's there, you're going to start believing something's there, and then it manifests over time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a risk you get into in this field, right? Like you can get caught up in the story and then just start believing things, you know, like without even really
or manifesting yourself.
Yeah, you're manifesting it yourself.
Well, it's like all these years of doing this, I could probably tell you 3 residentials that are truly haunted. And I've done a lot of residentials in 24 years. So, you know, 3 of them out of all of them is most likely haunted. But, you know, other than that, like I always try to go into every location. There's nothing wrong here. And we're just going to have a good night. And just see what happens, you know.
Have fun hanging out with like-minded people and just sort of see what comes up, right?
Eat a lot of food.
Eat a lot of food and talk to an empty room.
That's right.
So real quick, Jason, people that listen via podcast, we've had your website up going through here, but can you tell everybody that's listening where's the best place to find you?
Yeah, I'm the co-founder of the Canadian Paranormal Society, and we have a website, canadianparanormalsociety.ca. We also have a Facebook group of the same name. The book, both the book and the documentary are available, well, from Small Town Monsters. So the website, there's smalltownmonsters.com. That's where you can order the book. The book's also available on Amazon as well. And when Cursed Waters comes out, it'll be available like on digital platforms, etc., like Apple TV and Amazon, etc. So please watch it when it comes out.
Absolutely. Okay.
We will. We're very excited for you. And thank you so much for coming on our first Ogopogo interview. And this is great. I can't wait to get the book. I can't wait to watch Cursed Waters. Congratulations, Jason, and all the hard work you put in and the research and everything. Can't wait to see what other creepy things come out of Canada.
Wendigo.
Wendigo's next.
But we would love to have you come back on. We'll be in contact and everything. We'll let you go. We'll close out the show. But thank you so much for everything you do. And everybody, please, the links are in the description of the show. Even when it's up on podcast, the links will be there too. But please go follow Jason and see what else he's doing with Small Town Monsters.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jason. Have a good evening.
Emily and Will, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care.
There we go. Jason Hewlett.
There we go.
Ogopogo. Everybody, take your last drink if you're drinking. Drink responsibly. I'm out. Which was just water. It was water tonight. Yeah, it was water. But it's flavored water. I have my backup water bottle. But anyway, drink safely.
Johnny Walker. Love it.
Next week.
Who's on next week, Emily?
Oh, I'm so excited for next week because we've rescheduled a couple times. And Dennis Stone is finally coming on. He is the owner of America's Stonehenge. So we're going to be talking about Stonehenge next week. Woo, woo, woo. I'm so excited about that. But everybody, please. And I just want to do a reminder here at the end of the podcast tonight is that I am looking for 2 more people to come on in October to talk about if you've investigated some spooky hotels, if you have paranormal evidence or anything, haunted hotels, please message me. I think this will be very easy to fill. I'm doing something different this year. Usually we have a lot of TV people on every year, but I like to.
Let's do something different.
Yeah, I like to have people that listen to the show or watch the show, support the show, come on and tell their stories. So this year, Haunted October, I want your stories. So please message us on Facebook, Instagram, or you can go to our website. It's in the description of the show. But we thank you, everybody. Next week, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, same here with Dennis Stone, American Stonehenge. You all have a wonderful, awesome weekend. We'll see you next Friday, same time, same place. Thank you all.